People really like Jurassic Park. And for good reason. It's a staple of the millennial cultural diet. Our formative years were spent in awe of the incredible practical and visual effects, compounded with the terrifying sounds of approaching footsteps, rippling in our impressionable minds and resonating into adulthood. The film hit an unexpected public like a meteor and forever changed the landscape of blockbuster movies, which meant that, inevitably, the property yielded a long-awaited sequel. The Lost World Jurassic Park was released in May 1997 and was, to put it gently, somewhat less adored by fans and critics alike. The third film, released in 2001, effectively managed to bury the series until the summer of 2015, where it was excavated and revived by Universal at the hands of director Colin Trevorrow. Suffice it to say, no sequel to the first Jurassic Park has managed to recapture the awe-inspiring majesty of the original. But in watching the sequel, The Lost World, we here at Digging Deeper began to notice some pretty striking parallels between the world of the story and the world in which the movie itself was made. Maybe The Lost World, or at least some of the creative people behind it, understood that their creation was doomed to forever languish in the shadow of its predecessor, and that trying to siphon a film franchise out of the fossilized remains of the original could only end badly. Now, to be clear, this is not us saying that The Lost World is actually a great movie, or that, in being self-aware, it avoids any of the pitfalls it might possibly warn against, but simply that there may be more going on beneath the rough skin of this Spielberg-helmed sequel than what initially meets the eye. So, what makes us think that The Lost World might be a meta-critique of itself? Well, there's some things here to note. First, the sequel had been long discussed but often delayed as Universal awaited the development of a follow-up novel from the original author Michael Crichton. When it was finally completed, there was some discussion over who would direct the film, and it was initially offered to future Jurassic Park 3 director Joe Johnston. But the job would eventually land with Spielberg, and the script was written by David Koepp, who also penned the original Jurassic Park in collaboration with Crichton. In this sequel, we are presented with a somewhat disenchanted Dr. Ian Malcolm, played by Jeff Goldblum, who has left his traumatic experience on the island behind him, but is roped back into a return to it by John Hammond, the creator of the original park. Here we can see some possible parallels to Spielberg, who, thanks to his multiple successes, had risen to a level of celebrity, which is rare for a director, and is pulled back into revisiting an experience better off left in the past. Even with the blessing of the original creator of the property, Malcolm, read Spielberg, recognizes the pitfalls of returning to such a dangerous and volatile territory in hopes of achieving greater success.
I'm not making the same mistakes again.
No, you're making all new ones.
It is only when he learns that another professional in his same field is already involved in the project and taking the lead, that he agrees to sign on and try to steer the ship through the tumultuous waters that he, and only he, understands lie ahead. In this way, The Lost World becomes a somewhat macabre mockery of the original film, hitting similar beats and revisiting many classic scenes from the first, but meanwhile taking many of the character types and flipping them completely on their heads. The sequel is populated by characters that distinctly reverse the traits of their predecessors in the original film, with Malcolm, again the surrogate director, the only holdover. Sarah, as we mentioned, might be alluding to the upstart, young, and hungry director who is happy and eager to take over if Spielberg declines. She has a deep appreciation for the subject matter and the craft she practices, and she has a genuine desire to uphold her ideals and to be respectful of the material. Plus, when we first see her, it's behind the lens of a camera. In the bizarro character-flipping realm of The Lost World, Sarah could be seen to parallel Dr. Ellie Sattler from the first film, where Dr. Sattler is patient, composed, courageous, and ultimately quite self-sufficient and independent. Sarah is more impetuous, her education and menial experience endowing her with a brash arrogance that puts not only her, but ultimately the entire operation in jeopardy. Where in the first film Dr. Grant was skeptical, cautious, and esoteric, Vince Vaughn's Nick Van Owen is excitable, cocky, and brash. The blood-sucking and cowardly lawyer from the first film is replaced with a smart-talking, but ultimately heroic equipment expert named Eddie Carr. Both characters are placed in a position of responsibility over a child or children, and both abandon them, leading to their ultimate demise. Both films also feature a character with an ulterior motive for being on the island, Dennis Nedry in Jurassic Park and Roland Tembo in The Lost World. While Nedry's trying to smuggle dinosaur DNA off the island for money, Roland wants to hunt and kill a T-Rex for his own personal satisfaction. While Nedry's disrespect and hubris leads to his death at the hands of a spitting dino, Roland's deep respect and understanding of the animals allows him to capture one alive. Hammond's nephew, Ludlow, can then be seen as the inversion of his uncle in the first film, where Hammond had a genuine appreciation and love for his ventures, however misguided they may have been. Ludlow seems little more than a greedy businessman who wants to revisit the park solely in order to capitalize on the tremendous material assets he knows still reside there. For Ludlow, restricting this experience to some far-off place is antiquated and absurd, where he envisions a future in which the spectacle is brought to you. Keep in mind this is at a time where the rise of home video and rental stores meant that blockbuster films were for the first time not constrained to the theater, but able to be brought home for the entire family to enjoy again and again. Driven by his greed and visions of grandeur, Ludlow leads an entire team to Isla Sorna to capture the dinosaurs that made the first Jurassic Park so iconic, and bring them back for audiences to consume from the comfort of their own homes. We can read this as an effort to make cinema an experience unconstrained to the theaters or to far-off theme parks. It has to be immediate, convenient, consumable. Where in Jurassic Park we have a small group of unprepared but idealistic experts who ultimately rise to the occasion, The Lost World gives us the InGen Corporation, a massive and overzealous task force composed of experts, consultants, specialists, and grunts who barge into the world of the story with all the tactfulness and subtlety of a battering ram. Yet, despite all of the manpower and expertise they possess, all InGen manages to do is create chaos and confusion. The parallels to a high-budget film set might be all too striking. While InGen's people are all very specialized, they all have their own agendas, or fail to grasp the greater purpose behind their mission. But, as Ludlow clearly points out,
it exists because we made it, we patented it, we own it.
And so they can do what they want. The small, committed team of qualified experts in the first film becomes a squabbling mob of impetuous micromanagers in the sequel, who, despite their superior funding and technology, are still unable to avoid spectacular failure in the handling of their own creative property. By taking these characters from the first film and turning them upside down, the film alludes to its own unnatural nature, a photo-negative of its forebear that never needed to be developed. The Lost World not only reverses the character types from the original, but also the way in which they go about escaping from the island itself. While in Jurassic Park the group is caught unprepared by the disaster that befalls them, they band together and overcome the odds to escape, thanks to their resourcefulness and intelligence. Their survival hinges on their knowledge of dinosaur behavior and biology, on this little girl's awesome computer hacking skills, and on sexy Jeff Goldblum. They escape despite being literally crippled and hobbled, through their wits and intelligence, along with a very fortunately timed T-Rex. However, in the sequel, the characters manage to escape basically in spite of their group being composed of and surrounded by idiots. From the incompetence of the InGen employees, to thinking it's a good idea to bring a baby T-Rex aboard a bus, to Sarah Harding forgetting to hide the snacks in the blood-soaked jacket in her tent. Their escape is due less to their intelligence and more to the fact that there are enough ancillary characters around to soak up all the velociraptors for them, in order for them to pass safely through. And even once they do manage to get away, the stupidity of InGen means that they are not out of danger, even back on American soil. In this film, it's not intelligence that saves them, but action. The kids who survive thanks to smarts and computer savvy in the first film make it out with kung fu gymnastics skills in the second. The tense standoffs with dinosaurs from Jurassic Park are replaced with gunfire and screaming in The Lost World. Eventually, the film abandons any pretense of actually honoring its predecessor by literally leaving the park itself and bringing a T-Rex to the streets of San Diego. The ensuing chase scene references films like Godzilla, Speed, and King Kong, as the Rex rampages through the suburbs of mainland America. Blockbuster films, as we're shown here, are not only doomed to become bigger and dumber thanks to a more producer-driven, big-budget Hollywood model, but thanks to the rise of home video, the experience will now follow you home from the theater. It's in your city, on your street corner. It's in your backyard. In a cameo, the writer of the film, David Koepp, is literally devoured by his own monstrous creation. A blockbuster movie for the new age that is bigger, badder, and exponentially dumber than that which came before. Moreover, it warns of the implications of nostalgia being so readily available. If the original blockbuster becomes immediately and numerously consumable, then the demand for sequels and remakes intensifies. The death of the author in front of the bookstore by his own creation then becomes a microcosm of the world the sequel is alluding to. A concern for the future of mainstream cinema that is ironically being ushered in by the grandfather of the blockbuster itself. The director uses this reckless film, bound full steam ahead for a disastrous collision with the American viewers, to jump ship on the entire franchise, ending it with a desperate plea to leave the material be.
These creatures require our absence to survive, not our help. And if we could only step aside and trust in nature, life will find a way.
Just let the first film be enough. Stop trying to capitalize on something that was once great by cheapening and bastardizing it just for the sake of turning a profit. Just leave it alone. Okay, so let's be clear. This movie isn't good. This is not a good movie. But if you take into consideration the things we've been talking about, how The Lost World can actually be read as a sort of self-aware meta-critique of the changing nature of blockbuster filming and the fears of what it might become, and you watch this movie with that in mind, there's some pretty interesting stuff going on. Enough even to think that it's possible that director Colin Trevorrow was in his own way attempting to do the same. Let's dig in, shall we? Jurassic World speaks to a modern cinematic era where home video and DVD sales are bereft. Without the added revenue of DVD and Blu-rays to supplement a movie's earnings, Hollywood studios are sticking to a model based on broad, recognizable tentpole films that are all but guaranteed to turn massive profits and create franchises. Jurassic World is a product of such an era, and we think the movie knows it. In Jurassic World, living dinosaurs have become pedestrian, normal, and boring to audiences that have seen them over and over, and thus the novelty of them has faded. In the same way, the big-budget modern tentpole films have become over-reliant on CGI and special effects to create visually spectacular films that will draw in big crowds and perform well at the box office. But the fact is that CGI just isn't as impressive to audiences nowadays as it was once upon a time. When the first Jurassic Park came out, the visual effects were otherworldly, feats of technical genius that stunned and amazed. While they've held up extremely well given how much time has passed, it is simply not enough anymore to present people with beautifully rendered CGI dinosaurs.
They're dinosaurs, wow enough.
Not according to our focus groups.
No, they need something more, something bigger, cooler, crazier. Enter the Indominus Rex. A hybrid fusion of animal and dino DNA cooked up in a lab to appease the voracious appetites of the paying public as well as the money-hungry investors. While fanboys and purists long for a nostalgic return to the ways of the original park, the general public clamors for something new and different. As in The Lost World, the film's self-referentiality can be extended to the characters, as they allude to figures or entities within the world of the modern Hollywood landscape. Claire Deering, the park's operations manager, is the cold, calculating executive type, less concerned with the intellectual property or its integrity than with the bottom line and appeasing her superiors. Simon Masrani, the park's wealthy owner, could be seen as the new age, hands-off producer type. He provides the money but doesn't meddle with the day-to-day operations. He genuinely cares for the product and the audience's experience, but he doesn't have the know-how or background to actually run the show himself. He is earnest and well-meaning, but preoccupied with innumerable other ventures, making him a benevolent but absentee type of conglomerate father figure. Dr. Henry Wu, the scientist who creates the dinosaurs, could be seen as the actual digital artist.
All of this exists because of me.
Who cooks up artificial entities under tight time constraints without fully realizing the potential ramifications of his actions and the impact they might have on the landscape as a whole. Many people have noted the clean, overlit, almost cartoonish aesthetic of the film as being nothing at all like its predecessors, which favored fog, shadow, rain, and darkness over bright, gaudy images. This look, now quite common in blockbuster films, is often a product of effectuating CGI and green screen filmmaking, as the bright, flat image makes it easier to create believable computerized effects. Unlike the earlier films in the series, which had to hide their fledgling digital creations behind layers of shadow, fog, and foliage, in the new era of digital filmmaking, it's easier to shoot things plainly and brightly to make life easier for CGI artists. While this makes it possible to create some spectacular digital creations, it also makes them more susceptible to scrutiny, as they are not being hidden or used only in brief moments as they would have been in the past. Ironically, this has resulted in images that, despite the incredible advances in technology and skill by graphic artists, still look fake and unconvincing to the human eye. The film itself alludes to this within the creation of the I-Rex.
Nothing in Jurassic World is natural, but you didn't ask for reality. You asked for more teeth.
I never asked for a monster!
Noting that audiences don't necessarily want something that looks real, but rather something that looks visually spectacular. If we consider that, like in The Lost World, the dinosaurs themselves could be seen to embody the artistic spirit of the original Jurassic Park, or even just of cinema itself, then the I-Rex is the overtly commercial entity that it has become. While yes, the original dinosaurs were artificial, as are all filmic representations, at least they came from a place of genuine inspiration and creativity. So, as the I-Rex tears its way through the hapless creatures that were made unforgettable in the first film, we see the effects this media monster is having on the landscape of the filmmaking world. The death of the iconic Brachiosaurus coincides with the film's only practically created dinosaur, an homage to the first film, which was made so believable by the incredible animatronics and practical effects. CGI-heavy tentpole blockbusters currently seem like an unstoppable force in the future of Hollywood filmmaking, and Jurassic World even goes a step further to show us the real nature of this beast. We're meant to believe that this is the I-Rex about to burst through this door, but when it opens, the real monster is us, the crowds, the fans, the screaming, demanding, queuing audiences who will come out in droves to pay for recognizable brands and names. Jurassic World calls attention to its own nature as a rampaging beast of a film that is bound to devour small and medium-sized movies that don't have the financial backing to be a major hit. This non-sustainable arms race towards bigger and more lucrative tentpole films in Hollywood is leading towards a future where original or lesser-known concepts are far less likely to succeed or even to be produced in the first place. A world wherein the original Jurassic Park might never have even been made. But wait, there's more. Vic Hoskins, the head of InGen Security Operations, has a vision for the future, a vision in which the assets don't have to be bigger or scarier to be profitable. In fact, they need to be smaller. To him, the Velociraptors are potential tactical weapons, targeted agents that, while individually less formidable than the other giant predators, could be just as deadly by working together. While the I-Rex is big and visually impressive, the raptors are smart and effective, if they can be controlled. So again, if we accept that the dinosaurs are not just dinosaurs, but might be a way of commenting on the nature of the filmmaking world, the raptors could be seen as more cheaply producible, tactically deployable content. Delta, Blue, Echo, and Charlie? How about television, Netflix, transmedia, and video games? Thanks to providers like HBO and services like Netflix, small-screen media content is becoming not only increasingly accessible, but more and more popular, as series like Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, House of Cards, True Detective, and Jessica Jones are pushing the boundaries of small-screen storytelling to a place that rivals big-screen movies, allowing darker, more mature content alongside family-friendly programming. This could be the way of the future, where the lost revenue from physical movie sales can be made up in more cheaply produced streamable or playable content. And since this content is not being so heavily relied upon to generate revenue, studios may be able to take more chances with auteur-driven and creatively diverse programming that is smart, as well as crowd-pleasing. Again, the key to Vic Hoskins' plot is that these assets have to be controlled. If the content escapes the guidance of the studio overseer, it can turn against their interests. Art, after all, is not profitable in and of itself. It has to be targeted. Thus, through the film's subtext... Subrext? Like, instead of subtext, subrext?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. Through the film's subrext, it suggests to us as viewers that the unstoppable monster that is the present-day blockbuster, of which Jurassic World itself is to date the most successful, can potentially be overthrown through a combination of the past and the future of mass media. The great films that gave birth to the blockbuster, like Jaws in the 70s and which reached a pinnacle in films like Jurassic Park in the 90s, can perhaps inspire a return to artistically driven cinema that has a true creative vision and integrity behind its spectacle. It symbolically suggests that with the assistance of new forms of small-screen media, we may be able to incite a return to a more traditional and classic form of filmmaking, that the monster that Spielberg himself helped to create can be devoured by the jaws from which it was born. What about the babysitter? What does she represent?
Well, she's like I guess you could say she's either like foreign or independent cinema.
Bullshit.
No, really, wait, think about it. First time we see her, she has like this list in front of her that kind of looks like subtitles. She's always in black and white. You can't even see her eyes. She's shrouded in glasses like some sort of like Godard or Fellini. She clearly has a foreign name, Zara, and she has a foreign accent as well. She seems disinterested and not concerned with the youth or what we would consider modern representation of an audience.
That actually does kind of make sense. So when she dies, what we're actually seeing is the art film just being horribly murdered by the blockbuster genre.
Yeah, and then if we extend about like events in the film mirror real life connotations, her death kind of mirrors the death of independent art house film itself. It's an overlong, preposterous, really horrible death, but it's something we've kind of wrought upon media making in and of itself. And all we can do is sit back and watch like abject horror that kind of consumes her.
I don't think we can say that. People are going to think we're insane.
Yeah, it's a little pretentious.
We won't say that.
No, it's okay.